All right, everybody, we should be live. So thank you all for tuning in. We have a super exciting show here with Jesse. We had usually Will Winter is the person who kind of leads this. He had something come up, so I'll be taking the lead, updating everybody on all the COVID loans and all the updates to that. We're going to give it a few minutes as we welcome people in and making sure that everyone is all squared away on the different social platforms that we're streaming on. Throughout this whole show, make sure you guys ask questions for Jesse. He has a lot of insights, legal and just into the different loans and stuff that we're going to be going through. So we'll give it a few minutes. I want to really quickly make sure that everyone is aware of our upcoming events and what we have going on. If you're not super familiar with what we do here at Entre, we're a social network for entrepreneurs. We do a bunch of events, and then we are getting ready to launch our app for entrepreneurs to connect all in one platform. So I'm going to really quickly, if you guys have, let me share my screen here. Okay, so it's going to take, should be loading here. If you guys go to just joinentre.com/events, you're going to come to a page like this with our whole event calendar. And you'll get to see all of our upcoming events. Obviously, this one right here is the one today. And we have a bunch going on the rest of this month and into June. We have some really cool events. So you guys can check those out. There's a lot more stuff on our site too that you guys can go through and everything. But I want to really quickly just jump into all of this, and we can kick things off. I'm going to introduce Jesse here. Jesse, thank you so much for coming on. I'd love for you to start maybe with a quick background on yourself, just before we get into the presentation and going through some of the loans and the updates with COVID and everything. Fill people in on your background and everything you guys do at Fourscore.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for letting us be part of this. So let me give you the kind of quick background of Fourscore. We're a small but growing team of business lawyers and people that work with other, with businesses. Some of our, team members are not necessarily lawyers, but we all kind of come to the business with the belief that ideas deserve opportunity. Now, that leads us to desire to work with innovative companies and people that are doing, different things. Most of the time, early stage businesses are pretty innovative. So we have a lot of early stage companies, but as clients, but we also work with a variety of businesses, whether they're in tech or not. Everything from, real estate type businesses to restaurants and bars, which are getting crushed right now, having to be closed, to service businesses and other types of businesses that are just really focused on doing things differently or bringing a new approach to an old industry. So right now we're a team of about 4.5 people. Most of us are based in the Research Triangle area of North Carolina, which is kind of Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, if you're familiar with that. And then we have sort of a satellite office out on the West Coast in San Jose, literally in a garage right now, which is kind of nice that it's in Silicon Valley in a garage.
That's very Silicon Valley of you.
Yeah, exactly. But we basically do a lot of venture financing work. We do a lot of mergers and acquisitions work, and then we serve as outside general counsel for businesses that either, aren't big enough to really warrant the need for a full-time attorney, or do have in-house counsel, but they need, help on the transaction, or they just don't have, enough hands to handle a certain project. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. I can go into more depth if you want, but that's the brief summary.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great intro. I think one of the biggest things that attracted, us to, wanting to partner and work with you guys too is, you are not just, geared towards startups and this type of industry, but you also are not a massive firm and are going to, charge people ridiculous amounts of money to get the things that they need to get going. You know what I mean? And I think there's a lot of value in that. And especially with you guys, I mean, we met Ben, who's one of your partners at Startup Grind. Obviously you guys are, throughout the country, but like, I feel like you're very entrepreneurial in and of yourselves, even though you guys are attorneys. So, that's one of the things that attracted us to work with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, we love working with entrepreneurs. We love working with new businesses. And it's definitely a blast. And Ben is great. He's the guy in the garage right now.
Yeah, fantastic. That's awesome. And for everyone tuning in, I know we're going to have people coming in and out since we're doing this on a bunch of different platforms. But as you're going through this, if you guys have questions, feel free to shout them out. We'll be doing a Q&A towards the end. But one of the things that we want to do as well is really make this kind of open. So whatever you guys are going through with your businesses or whatever, if you're applying for loans, if you haven't gotten loans, let's hear about it. We're going to be able to go through this presentation really quickly with updates. So if you haven't been on one of these before, this is done by Will, our accounting partner, put this together. He's not able to join us today, but if you're watching from the website, there's also a link to a database of all the resources, links, everything that you need. If you just go to joinentre.com/live, scroll down on the page, click there, you'll get access to a free Google Doc. You can download, do whatever you want with. All the links to the programs, loans, grants, everything's in there. And if you guys have questions or anything, feel free to reach out to Will. His information's right here as well on some of this stuff. But we're going to just jump into everything super quick. A lot of you guys are already familiar with some of this stuff. The economic injury disaster loan, this was rolled out as like one of the first things. So I don't want to spend too much time on this because this is generally kind of an older loan. If you guys already applied for this, you know what I mean? It's a great opportunity. You can get an advancement depending on how many employees you have, up to $10,000, and definitely something worth applying to if it generally fits all businesses, and even nonprofits can apply for it as well. But the main thing that I want to get into is the PPP loan. Since the Congress just basically rolled out a new update on this, and I know Jesse, you can share some of these updates too with everything. But generally speaking, who can apply? It's pretty much nearly every business, fewer than 500 employees. And generally the loan and how much people are going to be getting is going to be up to $10 million at a 0.5% interest rate, right? So typically how they structure this is 250% of the average monthly payroll costs. That's how much your loan is going to get. Now, there's a lot of different things that they're also including into some of these other costs. Not just payroll, but rent, mortgage, interest, utilities, other things you guys can also put and get, to leverage your costs and get a higher loan out of this. Now, one of the things that we've run into personally with Entre applying for this is we have Bank of America. Now, Bank of America is not approving anyone for a PPP loan unless you have a prior lending relationship with them, or you don't have any other credit cards or anything. So for us, we had to go through a different bank, right? So we used Radius. I know there's a lot of other banks that are part of this program. So if you reach out to your primary bank and they aren't approving you, you can still get the loan through a different bank. You do not have to go through your existing bank. There's other people that are lending this and part of the government program. So basically, this is, this just came out. They did a new round of this. I'll kind of pause there and let Jesse, maybe share some of his thoughts on this PPP loan, since he's obviously dealing with this. And I'm sure, Jesse, a lot of your clients and startups and companies you work with are going through this. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And then if anyone has any questions about the PPP loan, now's the time to ask them, since we're on this topic too.
Sure. We obviously have a lot of clients that have applied for this, and it's a very interesting, and as far as I know, new program that I've certainly never been involved or really learned anything about. Loans that are 100% guaranteed by the government and forgiven as long as you hit certain certain metrics and you do certain things. A couple thoughts on here. The interest rate, I think, actually got moved up to 1%. Although that is essentially irrelevant if you qualify to have the loan forgiven. A lot of people had trouble with the calculation of what the average monthly payroll cost was. I know we use ADP personally, and I know there's a lot of other payroll providers out there, but hopefully they or your CPA can help you figure out what the what your loan amount should be, what you should be asking for. I don't know. I think from what I've heard about, so back at the beginning of April, the federal government, allocated almost $350 billion to this PPP program. All of that money was gone within 2 weeks. So I think April 16th, or maybe it may have taken until last week, but within the last week or so, not quite, but they essentially doubled it. I think another 310 billion is what Congress allocated for now. And it sounds like that money is going at roughly the same rate, so it's about half gone now. What I don't know, what would be interesting to know, is how much of a backlog is there to applications that have already been made, but lending decisions haven't been finalized yet. And Michael, your point about the certain banks the problem with this program is that banks are not making any money on it. And so a lot of the bigger banks, at least, and this is my opinion, right? This is not gospel, but a lot of the bigger banks sort of realize that and may have dragged their feet a little bit in getting the program together, because they didn't really want to spend the time to do what it was going to take and really not have any return. So in this case, it sounds like a lot of businesses that have sort of more local or regional banking relationships kind of were at had an advantage. And it's interesting. I mean, I know I kind of came out of this feeling like, man, I never really personally had a situation before where it was so obvious that you don't want a banking relationship, or really any other type of service provider relationship, where the person providing the services doesn't really need your business. And the small banks need those small businesses. If those go away, I mean, the bank is going to be in serious trouble. And so, a lot of the local banks and smaller banks have sort of, required new customers to either move all of their banking to, all their business banking to that small local bank in order to process their loan application, or essentially making you promise that you're going to do that. So anyway, that's just a couple thoughts on that. I guess back into like the loan forgiveness piece. I'm pretty sure in order to have the loan forgiven, what you're basically going to have to show is after 8 weeks, following when you receive the funds, you're going to have to show that you have had payroll costs of at least 75% of the loan amount that you received.
Right.
And then that other 25% can be made up on those other eligible costs: rent, mortgage interest if you own your commercial building, office building, or whatever, utilities. There's some other things in there, but that 75% is the minimum amount. If you don't spend at least 75% of the loan amount on payroll within the 8 weeks after the funding, then the loan's not going to be forgiven.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to that point too, and something that you brought up earlier, we originally didn't get when we originally applied for the PPP loan, we weren't able. The funds ran out for us, and they kept our application. And then last week, once everything got approved, they put our application through. So what's happening right now is, if you haven't applied yet, you have to jump on this now, because literally all the people that were in the queue, they're getting the new money. So all the new applicants, I don't even know if they're going to be able to. It's going to go so fast again.
Yeah.
Now, I think a lot of people are taking advantage of this that don't really even need the money and stuff. You've seen probably in the news some universities and other things with huge endowments. They're taking some of this money that's meant for small businesses that are getting really hit by this. So it will be interesting to see how everything plays out once the money's allocated and stuff. And they might be rolling out new stuff, but if you're watching, you have a business, that business got hit, and you haven't applied for a PPP yet, you're really missing out on a huge opportunity, to get additional financing at fantastic rates, right? And it's something that I encourage everyone to look into. Now, to your last point, you are going to need to show that the money is going to payroll and these other costs as things go on as well. So before we move on, Jesse, is there anything else that you wanted to add to the PPP loan?
I mean, to your point about the companies that have been getting this funding and don't really need it, there have been some stories out there. For some reason, Shake Shack is the one that I can think of off the top of my head, but that's a publicly traded company that I guess they qualified based on whatever the whatever the metrics were, but they actually sent the money back, and they did it. I think it was them that did some kind of internal funding round with their existing investors, or they may have just sold more stock publicly. I can't remember exactly how they did it, but they were able to kind of come up with the money in a different way. Ben just slacked me, said that he thinks the Lakers got money too, that the basketball team, the NBA Los Angeles Lakers, but sent the money back, which probably makes sense. That's really not what it was intended for. The only other thing I wanted to mention, and I am bringing this up only so that people can kind of do their own research on it, but there are still, I think, a lot of open questions about whether venture-backed companies are eligible for this. And it kind of, the questions all swirl around the term affiliate. And the definition of an affiliate under the SBA regulations is pretty broad. And so depending on who you talk to, and there's some very smart people on both sides of this, some people are sort of interpreting the rules to mean that if a group of minority investors have veto rights or protective provisions that allow them to block the board from doing things, even though they're not a majority, that would sort of make the investor an affiliate, and therefore any company that they have invested in is an affiliate. Which pretty much blows out of the water the maximum 500 employee limit under the PPP rules, because they would combine all of the employees of all the portfolio companies for that investor for each portfolio company.
Right.
I am not an SBA expert. That does not make any sense to me. And I've read that from some very, very smart people that are SBA experts. So that, I don't know that it's necessarily, answered yet, but I've also read an interpretation from another smart lawyer, tax lawyer, that affiliate language is really only talking about situations where a single investor owns a majority of the company. And in that case only would that investor's other portfolio companies be considered affiliates for the maximum number of employees. So that's, I think, still an open issue. Again, I don't have a definite answer to it, but a lot of our clients fall under that sort of venture-backed company. And we'll see how it plays out. But this is a great program. It seems like hopefully it's going to be used the right way. And hopefully it can save a lot of companies from laying people off, which is kind of the whole point.
Exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of the tech companies, that have funding in a significant, equity interest from investors were pretty pissed about how they originally rolled it out. I think they've made some changes to that. I can also that we have a previous SBA attorney in our network too, that he's helped out with some of this stuff with Will too. So, we can put people in touch with him if they're interested. Just reach out to us, and happy to do that. Okay, let's move on here real quick. I want to just get through this, and then we can go through some of the legal stuff, Jesse, through what you were talking about. So there's another program that they've rolled out, the employee retention credit. So it's fully refundable tax credit for employers equal to 50% of qualified wages. Applies to qualified wages paid after March 12th and before January 1st of next year. So basically after March 12th through the rest of the year. They limit it per employee is 10,000, maximum credit per employee is 5. Basically, employers who fully or partially suspended operations during the quarter of 2020 due to COVID, that's who can qualify for this. So this is an additional credit that people can apply for this. Now, it's something that you're going to have to show significant decline in gross receipts during the quarter, and same thing. So another credit or another program, another credit that you guys can apply for through this. Here's some more information on that. It starts first quarter. Self-employed individuals aren't eligible for this. So again, this has to be something where you have employees and showed like basically significant loss in that. So there's also another thing, deferral of IRS employer payroll taxes. Basically from April 1st through the end of December, employers may elect to defer payments of the 6.2% employer Social Security tax. This is another thing that people should take advantage of if you have a lot of employees and stuff. This is big, can definitely save you some money, and then it's basically going to get then allocated out in equal parts over the next 2 years, right? You cannot elect if receiving assistance through PPP. So if you get a PPP loan, you can't really do this. Do you know what I mean? So you should probably wait to see what happens with your PPP loan if you apply for that, and then you can talk about doing a deferral for the employer payroll tax. But it can be combined with the employee retention credit. So you can get the credit and also get this as well, but not the PPP loan. All right, what else do we have here? So should you do the PPP or the employee retention credit? You can't qualify for both, right? So, it's one of those things where I recommend at this point, you should probably talk to Will or your CPA attorney and whatnot, experts in this space. and go through which one you should apply for. If you have a lot of employees, it seems like and can show significant loss during the last quarter. It seems like the employee retention credit could be, you could actually get a higher amount, and it's also pretty, pretty quick. There's no application and waiting period and whatnot. So I'd recommend talking to Will about that if you guys have questions. I'm gonna drop his email here at the bottom. It's just will@wintercpas.com. So that if you guys don't already or haven't talked to, you can see the ticker there. If you guys don't or have not already been talking to your CPA or accountant about this, these are the people who are going to be able to point you in the right direction, because there's also additional things that you guys can do as you start filing your 2019 taxes and how you should be structuring that to benefit from some of these loans as well. There's a lot of different strategies that go into this, so definitely recommend reaching out to him or your CPA and going through this with them. So the IRS stimulus payments, obviously, they're starting to roll out these $1,200 checks, $2,400 if you're married, and $500 per child. Obviously, you have to kind of meet certain requirements for this, but it seems like some people are getting their checks. Now, you aren't going to be able to get your check until you file your 2019 taxes. So that's why some people haven't gotten their checks yet, and they're wondering why. It's because you need to file your taxes. And they're basically pointed out of that. You're not just getting a straight like $1,200 check. So this is another Families First Coronavirus Response Act. Certain employers are required to provide paid sick leave or expanded family medical leave for specific reasons. So basically, what this means is there's certain programs that certain employers have to apply or basically are required to provide these things. So this also applies to self-employed individuals. Now businesses, businesses get a tax credit for such paid leave. So if you are offering paid sick leave and medical leave for people, for employees due to COVID, you can get a tax credit for this. Now, it looks like it doesn't really affect anyone under 50 employees, so more or less for larger corporations and things like that. But if it applies to you, or you need to learn more about this, if you're helping some employees with paid sick leave and some of this stuff, it's definitely something else to look into. All right, so they're extending tax returns and due dates. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but it's now due, instead of April 15th, which already passed, it's due July 15th. So get up on that with your CPA and accountant for that. And then you can also file an extension. That's October and through September as well. But I think that's and then unemployment benefits. So this is another thing too, right? If you are filing for unemployment, it doesn't really pertain to, necessarily, obviously, businesses if you're doing this. And there's certain other relief programs that are going on right now as well. So non-disaster SBA loans. So there's other loans that you guys can get. There's a Express Bridge loan. It's a pilot program. There's a lot of other things if you guys go on the SBA.gov website that you can apply for. So there's
Michael, can I
go
one
for
comment
it.
in?
Yeah.
One thing that might be helpful for business owners, or either business owners or for people that work for one or more businesses in a consultant or contractor, in that kind of a role, they're not a W-2 employee. Some states are opening up unemployment benefits to 1099 contractors, which is not something that's ever happened before. I know North Carolina began accepting unemployment applications from 1099 contractors last Friday, and that's on a state by state basis. So it may or may not be in the state that you're in, but I know I've had several of our clients and friends of mine that own businesses here in North Carolina, reach out to try to figure out how to help their people. They're not technically employees of the company, but they work very closely with with the owner, or they are, whatever, they're coaches at a CrossFit gym, or whatever the case may be. And they're not technically W-2 employees, and therefore normally they would not be eligible for unemployment benefits. But because of all this stuff that's going on, at least some states have been allowing 1099s to make those applications.
Yeah, that's a great point. The other thing too is, and it's on this slide here, guys, there's a lot of other companies, Google, Facebook, Yelp, they're rolling out all these ad credit programs. We've applied for Google and Facebook's, and there's a lot of other companies that are giving out credits, different types of programs, and free ad spend, different things like this to companies and businesses. So there's a lot of ways to and really unique opportunities that are rolling out right now. And this is really just the beginning. So that's why we've been doing this pretty much like every other week, going through some of these updates for everybody. And like I said too, if you're watching it on the website or go to the website, you'll get a free Google Doc that we've put all these links and stuff in, so you can check it out. And let me see if there's anything else here. Grubhub, there's a freelancers relief fund as well that you guys can check out. There's a lot of city, and Jesse, you brought this up. There's a lot, like, states are doing things. States have their own programs. Cities have their own programs. So there's a lot of unique things that are happening, like, locally and regionally. So wherever you're at, whether you're in Cali, New York, Pittsburgh, Florida, whatever, look at what your states and cities are doing too, because there's different programs and stuff that they're rolling out in addition to this federal money, and all sorts of different things. So look into these things, look into different programs and stuff that are happening around you, because states and cities are also getting money to do this sort of thing as well on the local level as well. And let's see what else we got here. So then just webinars. Let me see if he has anything else. CARES Act. So this is something interesting too, where there's an opportunity for certain people impacted by COVID to actually take money out of their 401k or IRA without a penalty, $100,000 max. No mandatory income tax withholding. Amounts drawn can be paid back over 2020 and through 2022. So this is pretty interesting what's happening. I know some people's 401ks have been taking a hit. So you can actually take the money out of that without having a penalty before the traditional time that they would normally, vest at, for IRAs and stuff at 60, 65 years old, you can take your money out. So some people can actually do this. So if you guys look into this as well, if you have a lot of money sitting in your 401k or IRA and you're struggling for capital right now, you can actually pull some of that money out without a penalty early. So take a look into that. Like I said, reach out to Will if you have questions about this stuff too. He's going to have a lot more of the answers for you as well. So who qualifies? Individuals have diagnosed with COVID or someone in their family who own or operate a business, lost hours, reduced hours. So if you or anyone in your family has been diagnosed with COVID, you can apply for this and be able to pull money out of your 401k. And then same thing with if your business has been affected by it, you should be able to pull some money out as well without a penalty. So definitely something else to take a look at. And then here's Will's contact information. If you have questions for him about that, like I said, the other thing too is you can go onto our site, joinentre.com/live, scroll down on the page. Entre members get 20% with Will if you want to talk to him about accounting or any of this stuff. If you want him to do your taxes, anything else, I mean, he's fantastic. He hooks us up. He hooks up everyone in our network. So definitely reach out to him if you have questions about that. And now I want to jump into the legal stuff, right, with Jesse, and then we can talk some more about this. So is there anything real quick that you wanted to add, or if anyone has any questions real quick before we jump into this on the PPP loan and everything, or what we just went through, we can move on. Jesse, if you don't have anything else to add.
Nope, I think I'm good.
Okay. All right, fantastic. So one of the things that I kind of first want to get into is just your general kind of advice for people, you know, in the, like your startups, the businesses that you work with everything going on with COVID and whatnot right now. What is your general advice for people? How should they be approaching their business, right? Is there anything that you're talking through with your current clients, your current startups, entrepreneurs that you work with? And what are you kind of going through with them as far as the different things that they can do, you know, to really just stay alive, to keep things moving? And then we can get into some of the more tactical stuff with some of the real estate, contracts, different things like this as well, talking to investors and stuff later on.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to start. You know, obviously, depending on what type of business you're in, I mean, we have clients that their businesses are crushing it because they're in telehealth, or they're in, you know, some other kind of like software that allows you know, people to collaborate online, or they do things virtually or whatever. And then there's a whole other group that really aren't that affected yet. It may you know, trickle down or up to them at some point. And then there's obviously a category of businesses that are just being completely decimated, whether they're you know, whether they're in the hospitality industry, or they're in travel, or, you know, anything along those lines. It can be really tough. So I think you know, first of all, obviously you need to know kind of where you stand, and I'm sure people at this point probably do. But I think everybody kind of needs to be, you know, patient. The tendency, at least at the beginning of all this, I think, was for you know, for business owners to cut costs, which makes sense. I mean, that's logical, but you know, there are going to be really interesting and unique opportunities that come out of this time. And I think you know, doing whatever you have to do to get yourself in the position to be able to see with fresh eyes what's going on can really kind of set up any type of business to come out of this quarantine time with a leg up. So that's easier said than done, depending on who you are and what you're doing, but I think that's important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the people in our network right now who we're kind of, you know, talking to about this, you know, right now it's like you have to adapt to what's happening, and you can't really, because honestly, who knows how long this is going to last, right?
Right.
And if things get back to normal and things start opening back up and we get back to work, and then it breaks back out, we're going to have to go back into another quarantine, another lockdown, right? So who knows how long this is going to last if we don't find a vaccine and whatnot. So as a business, you need to really understand, okay, how can I do everything that I'm doing, or figure out ways to, you know, do things virtually, digitally in this new kind of business mold, right? And you got to do it quickly because everyone else is thinking the same thing. So it's a weird time, and I totally agree with everything that you said in that regard. So one of the other things that we constantly keep getting, and I'm sure you're getting this too with some of your clients and startups that you work with, is how do I approach investors right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
For companies that, all right, we're raising a new round of funding, or we just raised a round, or we were in the middle of a round, right? How should we, one, talk to our maybe existing investors or people that we've been talking to, and just our team too, in addition to investors, but then how should we be approaching new investors too? What should we be saying to them as things are going on?
Sure. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and we can kind of send this around or make it available to people if it would be helpful.
Great. There we go.
So this is just a like one pager PDF. But we, recently, like within the last week or two, kind of put together, some content on a handful of different topics. And because we have a large, we have a lot of clients that are venture-backed companies. We put together this one article. It's kind of a follow-on to a separate, more general piece on, the practicality and reasons to kind of keep your investors up to date. But this particular article kind of piggybacks on the earlier one, and really, obviously this is a period of time where it is potentially more difficult, but also likely more important even than in normal times, to make sure that you are communicating with the people that have put their capital behind you. Investors by and large want to see their investments succeed, and they will do whatever they can do to try to help the founders that they've backed, get into the best position possible. And so if you're a founder of a venture-backed startup and you are not communicating with your investors, such that they don't really know what your needs are, they can't help you. And that is, you're sort of wasting an opportunity there to make sure that you are getting advice, contacts, introductions, maybe more investment funds, who knows? But it's really, really important generally to keep your investors kind of up to date, but I think even more so now. You don't, that the no news is good news. I'm not really sure that applies to your relationship with investors, because they need to know what's going on, and they can likely help you as well. Sorry about that. 4:45. Yep. Anyway, so that's one thing for people that are for companies that don't yet have investors. We have a number of clients, a dozen probably, maybe more, that are in various stages of trying to secure funding right now, or they were in that stage, back January, February timeframe. Just because you can't physically meet with investors does not necessarily mean that you can't continue down that path. So that article, the 6 tips for pitching investors remotely, kind of goes through some practical things to consider while you're trying to do that. It is not easy to raise money, and undoubtedly, at least in my opinion, I don't think it's going to be easier doing it remotely. But there are still investors out there who are looking for deal flow, and particularly if you are in an industry or a business that is positively affected by what's going on right now, there may be no better time than to try to raise money when you can justify, a lot of growth and positive revenue, and good product that's getting a lot of use from new customers and users. So I think those are some things to take a look at. Like I said, we can send that out and make it available afterwards. There's a ton of stuff on our website as well, if that is.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic. If you guys just email info@fourscorelaw.com, Jesse and his team will be able to send you that. And then also, you can just check it out on the site too, fourscorelaw.com. That's really good stuff. I think, yeah, it's huge. I mean, we send out updates, to our investors and everyone, even potential investors, every month, just letting them know what's going on and everything. So it's just huge right now. Communication lines just need to be open. You need to be transparent with everyone, and it's just right now it's figuring out, okay, how can we continue moving the ball forward, shed some light, figure out ways to provide positive news, and really just keep things moving, right? I think what's gonna win right now is like the people that can just stay alive are gonna be huge, right? Because as things start to get better, money's not going anywhere. I mean, there's people who have made and have raised ridiculous amounts of money right now, and there's a lot of funds who have a lot of money under management that are looking for for opportunities. They might not be investing necessarily as much as they were last year or the year before, but the money is still there. And if you can show that you've made it through these dark times and you make it to the end of the tunnel, once the dollars start coming back, they're going to be like, oh, wow, you guys were able to grow during COVID, and you guys were able to continue staying alive and build everything during that time. And now you're coming out through the other side and growing like crazy. Those companies are the ones who are going to be able to, get all of the cash coming out of this, because maybe not as many new companies are starting. So all of the money, in my opinion, is going to be flowing into some of these companies as things start to swing back up on the other side. So it's
it'll be interesting to see. A lot of funds that have been around for a couple of years now. Even if they had 2 or 3 or 4 more deals that they were planning to do, I think a lot of funds in that position are kind of hitting the brakes because they really want to conserve their cash for their existing portfolio.
Right.
But if you are able to find useful things, like I know internally for Fourscore, for our business, we've spent a significant amount of time about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I guess it was a month ago now. Coming up with a list of things that really would be valuable to spend time on while we are in this like quarantine period, where business might be a little bit slower than it normally is, so that we can get these projects knocked out and really be able to hit the gas when time comes. And I think that applies really for any kind of business. However, I will say I am very interested to see what happens with like venture deal terms when this is all over.
Yeah.
I know we do a significant amount of work in venture deals on the West Coast, and I mean honestly, some of the deals that we've been involved in for our own clients are pretty crazy when it comes to the valuations that are being used. At least it seems.
Are you saying right now or previously?
No, previously, like through 2019 and even the first part of Q1 were just they seem insane. And so maybe they're not insane, but it'll be very interesting to see what happens, because for so long funds have been really all about growth and not about profitability.
Right.
And that eventually has to change. Like either the company has to actually make a profit for the investors to get, to get a return, or it's not going to work out. And so it's weird. And we don't have to talk about this now. We can do it on a later session or something. But the higher the valuation in those earlier rounds, the harder that actually gets. And so. I'm curious to see, is this sort of going to completely reset everything and make it go back to like a more sane, negotiating style, or not? So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that. I think it's going to be definitely interesting to see what happens. And in my opinion, there's definitely Maybe it's kind of going right now, but there's definitely a bubble in the private tech market, just with insane valuations and no companies actually making money. And then with this happening, it's going to stunt a lot of companies' growth. So they're not going to be able to raise additional rounds, or they're going to have to take a lot of down rounds. So it will be interesting to see how things play out. That's why, it's, we're in an interesting time, but I think hopefully things get back a little bit to normal, especially, with what's going on in the Bay Area. But diving into kind of our next topic here, and we had someone ask a question similar to this too, with contracts, specifically even real estate contracts, lease contracts, right? A lot of people's contracts are getting canceled right now, or they're not able to fulfill them, or they're not able to go into their office. So why are they paying their lease, right? And their landlords are coming after them. So what are you recommending for businesses, startups that you work with on, are their contracts still, are they void right now? Should people be paying their leases if they can't access their office? Should people be, declining to defer on other contracts that they have in place that they're not able to fulfill on? What should people be doing right now as far as like contracts, leases, different things like that you've seen?
Yeah, so let me share my screen back to just kind of show a couple of things here. A lot of contract issues are coming up, obviously. There's a lot of types of businesses who can't do what they normally do because it's literally illegal, at least for the time being. Anybody that's in the physical event space, anybody that's in hospitality, anybody that's in fitness or healthcare other than like necessary physician healthcare type stuff, they're just not allowed to do what they do. And so the issue is you are either a person or a business that is incapable of doing what you're supposed to do, or you're a business that is asking for the services or the product that you've paid for, and the counterparty is incapable of giving it to you. And what we call that, so this is obviously a very basic graph, but what we call that is force majeure. And so I wouldn't say every, but many, many, many contracts have what is called a force majeure clause or an impossibility clause in them. And, basically we're talking about there's some kind of extenuating circumstance that just makes it impossible to do what you've promised to do. You can see there on the slide, force majeure is like a Latin term that means superior force, and that's literally what it is doing. There's something outside of the parties to the contract is making it impossible. So think, you're a distributor for, I don't know, you're a shipping company that picks stuff up from warehouses and delivers it to wherever it's supposed to go. Not using COVID as an example, the shipping warehouse, the point where you pick everything up is, there's a tsunami and that whole building is completely gone. Well, the person you're supposed to deliver those goods to is looking to you saying, hey, when and where are you going to deliver my stuff? And you're telling them we cannot go pick it up. That building is gone, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's the kind of thing that sort of falls under that force majeure clause in most cases. The COVID pandemic is interesting because it's not really like physically stopping people from doing things. So there's nothing about the COVID pandemic that, I used a CrossFit gym as an example before. There's nothing that physically stops a gym from opening because of this virus. But you do have, you do have executive orders in pretty much well, maybe not now because some states are starting to open, but many states still have executive orders closing businesses like gyms, restaurants, any type of business where people are physically close to one another. And so they are not able to operate. And it's not because of them, it's because of something that's being applied to them. And so, when you look at the example of like a warehouse that gets washed away by a tsunami or earthquake or something like that, that's pretty easy. When you look at a pandemic, it's a little bit different. And these clauses are typically like if you have a contract that you're unsure of, you should look because it probably has a force majeure clause. And they typically are drafted pretty broadly. So it's not going to give you, just a list of if there's a fire or there's a tsunami or there's an earthquake, then it's excused. It's usually a pretty open-ended list that does not necessarily have to be specifically named in order to qualify. But the pandemic is, potentially at least applicable in many cases. Now, the question about leases is an interesting one. And generally speaking, the obligation to make a payment is not something that is going to be, pushed off by a force majeure clause. So generally speaking, even though you're not allowed to go use your office space or your restaurant space or whatever the case may be, you probably do not have a contractual right to stop paying rent. What we have seen, and we represent a handful of more local co-working spaces here in the Triangle area. And what we've seen, and this is consistent with what I've heard from friends that are in commercial real estate, is that although it's extremely rare that tenants have the right to stop payment for force majeure or for something like this, many commercial real estate landlords are working with their tenants, and it makes sense because number one, it would look pretty bad if a tenant or if a landlord is going to bring all kinds of eviction claims and start the eviction process for a business that is already really hurting. But number two, from a practical standpoint, what is the benefit of that? It's not like the landlord's going to be able to get somebody else in there to pay rent now anyway. And a lot of states actually have put a moratorium on evictions. And so they're just saying, that technically under the contract, these tenants are supposed to pay, but we're not going to allow the landlord to start bringing eviction actions right now anyway.
Right.
What we have seen is we've seen a lot of landlords, be creative, and they'll say, hey, for the next month or the next 2 months, you're not going to pay us rent, but you're basically going to repay that over the next 12 months or in 2021 or whatever. And that way, they don't entirely lose out on the rent, but they're helping their tenant out. And that seems to be a pretty reasonable way to go.
Gotcha. So yeah, it's a weird situation because contractually it seems like people still should have to pay, but if the landlords try to enforce anything legally, they probably would not be able to, it probably wouldn't go through the court system anyway. So it's like a weird situation, right, where you're kind of in a spot where you should pay, but they probably can't enforce it even if it went to court, just because of the circumstances with everything going on right now. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably well, I guess my opinion on it, my take on it is if you have a lease, and you're having a problem being able to pay rent while you're not using the space, I would go directly to the landlord and say, just tell them, like, hey, obviously there's some very unusual circumstances here. We're not entitled to use the space, and we're really not able to pay the rent right now. we're not asking, well, maybe you are, but you can tell them, we're not asking you to let us out of the lease. We're just asking you to work with us. And I think, any landlord that, that wants to keep their tenant is probably going to listen and come up with something that works, because at the end of the day, even if they can bring an eviction proceeding, which I said a lot of states are putting on hold for right now, but even if you're in a state that has not done that, and the landlord is allowed to bring a tenant eviction action like they normally can, why would they do it? They're not going to get another tenant to pay rent. So what's the point?
Exactly. Yeah. What if, let's put it this way. What if you do reach out and they don't give you the terms that you're looking for, right? What do you do then?
Yeah, I mean, technically, you're going to be, in most cases, first of all, let me give my lawyer disclaimer. You can't use anything I'm about to say and tell them that, your attorney told you it was okay. So, in most cases, you're probably going to be in breach of contract if you don't pay the rent. If they bring an eviction action and you don't pay the rent and you don't get caught up and they want you out of the space, they're probably going to be able to get you out. But it's really unlikely that any of that's going to happen until the courts are back and open and sort of operating normally. So, I would say I would talk directly with your landlord. And if you're not sure what your force majeure clause means or how your lease works, you should talk to your attorney, because they'll be able to help you figure it out.
Yeah. What about maybe some people going through really tough times right now and they literally just can't pay it? How do they structure this with their landlords?
Yeah.
Can they get out of it? Can they just say, look, I don't have any money, no money's coming in, I'm gonna file for bankruptcy, and what should they do then?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can, if you file for bankruptcy, that kind of changes everything. Depending on whether or not you have personally guaranteed your lease, which that's a big difference. If you have not personally guaranteed your lease and your company goes bankrupt, for the most part, that's the end of it, probably. If you have personally guaranteed your lease, you got to be very careful about that, because if your company is now gone or bankrupt, they're going to be looking to you personally. And so before you take any of that type of action, you want to make sure you understand, where you stand. But I flicked back over to this other screen. This is another resource that might be helpful. This one's a little bit more in depth than the investor communication ones that I was talking about.
Yeah.
There is an article with it, but there's also about a 30-minute webinar that one of the other attorneys at Fourscore did a few weeks ago, more in depth on the force majeure clause. So if you're having issues with contracts or leases or whatever, that might be helpful to watch through as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Fantastic. All right. Well, I know we're already past 5, and I want to be respectful of your time. I'm sure you're super busy. Is there anything else you wanted to share right now? Where can people find you, learn more, get in contact with you as we wrap up here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the best way to reach us is to email the info@fourscorelaw.com that Michael put in the ticker. Obviously, check out our website. We've got a ton of other resources that might be useful as well. And then we can figure out some way to send this PDF around for these specific resources too.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, what we're gonna do is we'll send everyone a thank you email tomorrow. We can drop that in there, and then we're gonna be obviously promoting this, since this was streamed out on social and stuff. We're gonna be resharing this through our network throughout the week and everything to get everyone updated. If you want to rewatch this, or if you came in late, just go to our YouTube channel or just go to joinentre.com/live to rewatch it and get this information. And then if there's anything else that we can help you with, or that you think Jesse can help you with, if you guys are in the process of forming your company, going through, I know, Jesse, you guys do a lot of work with M&A and different types of things in that regards as well. If there's any other things legally that you guys need help with, please reach out to Jesse, and they can help you with that, and his team there at Fourscore. So really appreciate it, Jesse. Thanks so much for coming on. And this was awesome. I thought it's really interesting stuff. I mean, there's so much going on right now. So what we'll do is we'll keep people updated too if there's any other things that you see come through, as far as like contracts, legality with some of this stuff. We can update everyone too with that as things progress, but there's so many things changing. So glad that you guys are on top of this, and hopefully we can do some more of these. I know we're probably going to plan to even do some more like private workshops and going through some actual stuff as well, as far as just general startup and legal stuff in the future as well. So thank you so much. This was great. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully it's useful for the people watching, and I'll look forward to doing it again sometime.
Okay. All right, Jesse. Take care, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Yep, you got it. See you.